There is a basilica in Barcelona, Spain, that has been under construction since before your great-grandparents were born. A building that has survived a world war, a civil war, a catastrophic explosion that, by sheer chance, prevented something far worse. A global pandemic. A building whose architect died before a quarter of it was finished, whose original blueprints were burned to ashes, and whose construction permit was illegal for over 130 years. And yet today, right now, it stands as the tallest church on earth. Nearly 5 million people visit it every year. Not the most visited church in the world, the most visited building in all of Spain. You may have seen a photo. You may have even walked past it. But I promise you, you do not know this story. This is the Sagrada Familia. And after 144 years, it is finally almost done. It started with a bookseller. In the late 1800s, a religious bookseller named Josep Maria Bocabella had a dream. He wanted to build a great church in Barcelona. Not with government money, not with church money, but entirely through public donations, a place of worship paid for by the people, for the people. He bought a plot of land in a neighborhood that, at the time, was just fields at the edge of the city. Construction started in 1882 under a simple, standard design. Gothic, ordinary, forgettable. Within a year, the original architect quit. What happened next changed everything. A young architect named Antoni Gaudí took over the project. He was 31 years old. He looked at the original plans and threw them away. Gaudí wasn't a normal architect. He didn't work like a normal architect. He didn't think like one. He was obsessed with nature, with the curves of bones, the branches of trees, the geometry of seashells. He believed that straight lines belonged to human beings, that curves belonged to God. So he decided to build a church that had no straight lines at all, no flat walls, no simple towers, no predictable angles, every surface flowing, organic, alive, like something that had grown from the earth rather than been assembled by human hands. He called it his life's work. He had no idea how right he was. For over 40 years, Gaudí poured his entire life into the Sagrada Familia. He moved his studio onto the construction site. He stopped taking other commissions. In his final years, he gave away nearly everything he owned, donating his fees to the building itself. He was known to walk the streets of Barcelona in rags, covered in plaster dust, looking like a homeless man, which is exactly what people thought he was on the evening of 7th June, 1926. Gaudí was crossing a street on his daily walk to a nearby church for prayer when a tram struck him. He was so shabbily dressed, with no identifying documents on him, that passers-by assumed he was a beggar. No one helped him immediately. He was eventually carried to a charity hospital ward. It was only the next day that the chaplain of the Sagrada Familia recognized him, the most famous architect in Spain, lying in a pauper's bed. He died 3 days later, on June 10th, 1926. He was 73 years old. When Gaudí died, the basilica was less than a quarter complete. The rest existed only in his models, his sketches, his mind. And then those models were destroyed too. 10 years after Gaudí's death, the Spanish Civil War broke out. Anti-clerical anarchists broke into the Sagrada Familia, ransacked the crypt, and set fire to Gaudí's workshop. The detailed plans and plaster models he had spent decades building, gone, burned to ash. All that remained were fragments, photographs, scraps of paper. For the next several decades, a team of architects tried to piece together Gaudí's intentions from whatever had survived the flames. Imagine rebuilding a symphony from a few scattered pages of sheet music. That was their challenge. And there was another problem nobody talked about. The entire building had been constructed without a proper permit. Not for a decade. Not for 2 decades. For over 130 years, one of the most famous buildings on Earth was technically illegal. It was only in 2018 that the construction board finally paid the city of Barcelona 36 million euros, roughly 40 million US dollars, to settle the matter and obtain a legal permit. 136 years after ground was broken. The permit arrived 136 years late. So how do you build something this complex when half the blueprints no longer exist? For decades, the answer was very slowly. When Gaudi died, the building was less than 25% done. 50 years later, it was barely past 50%. The pace was agonizing. Then something changed. In the 1980s and 1990s, computers arrived on the construction site. For the first time, architects could model Gaudi's impossible geometries, his curved vaults, his branching columns, his interlocking stone systems, in 3 dimensions. They could rotate them, test them, finally understand what Gaudi had intended in a way that was simply impossible with pencil and paper. The pace transformed. 3D printing followed. Complex stone elements that would have taken a master craftsman months to carve by hand could be designed digitally and cut by machine in days. And the funding? That comes from visitors, from every tourist who buys a ticket. The Sagrada Familia has never received a single euro from the Spanish government, not 1 cent from the Catholic Church. Every stone, every tower, every piece of stained glass has been paid for entirely by private donations and ticket sales. In 2024, nearly 5 million people walked through its doors. The building generated over 130 million euros in revenue. More than half went directly into construction, a basilica literally being built by the visitors who come to watch it being built. The design itself is unlike anything in the history of architecture. Gaudi planned 18 towers in total, each representing a different sacred figure from the Christian faith. 12 for the apostles, 4 for the evangelists, 1 for the Virgin Mary, and the tallest of all, for Jesus Christ himself. That central tower now stands at 172.5 meters, the tallest church on Earth. And there is one remarkable detail about its height that only becomes striking when you learn the reason. Gaudi deliberately made the tower slightly shorter than the highest natural point in Barcelona, a nearby hill called Montjuic. He said human creation should never surpass God's creation. So he built the tallest church on Earth, and then stopped himself, just short of the hilltop. Let me try to give you a sense of what this building actually is. The facade facing east, the Nativity facade, celebrates the birth of Jesus. Every square inch of it is covered in carvings. Turtles at the bases of columns, because turtles carry their home on their back, a symbol of permanence. Real Barcelona residents were used as models for the biblical figures. Workers, pilgrims, ordinary people cast as apostles and angels. Even more striking, while sculpting the Portal of Mercy, Gaudi used death masks of recently deceased Barcelona citizens, the faces of real people who had just died, to shape the faces of the saints carved in stone. The facade facing west, the Passion facade, tells the story of Christ's suffering and death. It is angular, stark, almost brutal compared to the warmth of the Nativity side. It was designed to make you uncomfortable. It was supposed to. And the interior? The interior is the part that makes people stop speaking. The columns inside the nave branch at the top like an enormous stone forest. The ceiling is a canopy of interlocking geometric shapes. And the light, the colored light that floods through thousands of stained glass windows, transforms the space into something that does not feel like a human building at all. art critics have run out of ways to describe it. One called it probably impossible to find anything like it in the entire history of art. Another said it was the most extraordinary personal interpretation of Gothic architecture since the Middle Ages. And this is a building that is still, technically, not finished. The Glory facade, the main entrance facing south, is still being completed. The stairway Gaudi designed to lead up to it would require demolishing an entire city block. That argument is still being had. The final elements of the building are not expected to be complete until around 2034. After 144 years of construction, the exterior stands at its full height, and it holds the title of tallest church in the world. But it is not finished, and that has always been the point. Here is the thing about the Sagrada Familia that stays with you long after you leave Barcelona. It was never supposed to be a landmark. It was never supposed to be a tourist attraction. It was never supposed to be the most photographed building in Spain. It was supposed to be an act of devotion, a gift, something built slowly, by many generations, for something larger than any one of them. Gaudi knew he would never see it finished. He said, and this has become one of the most famous quotes in the history of architecture, "My client is not in a hurry." He meant God. His client was God. And God, he said, could wait. What he built in those 40 years, the vision he left behind in fragments and burned plaster and scattered photographs, took another century of architects, engineers, craftspeople, and nearly 5 million annual visitors to slowly, piece by piece, realize. And today, Gaudi is buried in the crypt beneath the basilica he spent his life on. In the chapel he designed, under the church he never finished. In April 2025, Pope Francis declared him venerable, one formal step on the path toward sainthood. A man who lived like a pauper, died unrecognized in a charity hospital ward, and now rests in the most visited building in Spain. On June 10, 2026, exactly 100 years to the day after Gaudi died, the Sagrada Familia will hold its official inauguration ceremony. Pope Leo XIV will preside, the centenary of his death, the completion of the tower he never saw. Gaudi always said the building belonged to the future, not to him, not to any one architect, to the people who would finish it, generations after he was gone. He was right about that too. If this story moved something in you, then subscribe. We will be here, building the impossible.